topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
What's working on purpose anyway? Each week, we ponder the answer to this question. People ache for meaning and purpose at work, to contribute their talents passionately and know their lives really matter. They crave being part of an organization that inspires them and helps them grow into realizing their highest potential. Business can be such a force for good in the world, elevating humanity. In our program, we provide guidance and inspiration to help usher in this world we all want, working on purpose. Now, here's your host, Dr. Elise Cortez.
Welcome back to the Working on Purpose program, which has been brought to you with passion and pride since February of 2015. Thanks for tuning in again this week. Great to have you. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. If we've not met before and you don't know me, I am a workforce advisor, organizational psychologist, management consultant, logotherapist, speaker, and author. My team and I at Gusto now help companies enliven and fortify their operations by building a dynamic, high-performance culture, inspirational leadership, and nurturing managers activated by meaning and purpose. And did you know that inspired employees in purpose-led organizations outperform their satisfied peers by a factor of 2.25 to 1. In other words, inspiration is good for the bottom line. You can learn more about us and how we can work together at gusto-now.com and my personal site, elisecortez.com. Getting in today's program, we have Dr. Jamie Goff, the founder of The Empathic Leader, where she specializes in helping leaders unlock their full potential through executive coaching, insightful workshops, and thought-provoking keynotes. She also serves as the Director of Leadership Development for an international healthcare system, where she designs and leads innovative programs that inspire leaders to thrive. Her career began in higher education as a professor of couple and family therapy, and later as an academic dean. She's the author of The Secure Leader, Discover the Hidden Forces That Shape Your Leadership Story and How to Change Them. We'll be talking about her research and expertise in relational attachment styles and how they manifest in leadership effectiveness. She joins us today from Dallas. Jamie, a hearty welcome to Working on Purpose.
Thank you, Elise. Thank you for having me.
Very welcome. And let's celebrate this beautiful thing you brought into the world. It's gorgeous. And I want to say a couple of things about it. One, it's really a unique take on leadership. As I mentioned before we got on air, we cover a lot of topics around leadership, but this is really a unique, specific take that really you are uniquely qualified to talk about. And I also want to congratulate you on creating a very cogently written that hangs together tight. I love the examples. Just really well done, Jamie.
Oh, thank you. That means so much to me, Elise.
Yeah, you're welcome. And we were talking before we got on air. I remember when we met more than a year ago at Mexican Sugar, and this was, a dream of yours. You were working on making it happen. And I said right then and there, well, when you get it done, sister, you got to come on my podcast and talk about it. And here we are.
Here we are. And you've been such a great supporter along the entire journey. So I'm deeply grateful.
You're welcome. And, we need to do that for each other, right? We all need encouragement and support, especially when we're going for our dreams.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I want to situate for our listeners and viewers who don't know you as well as I do. I think the fact that you have a background first in academia and specifically in mental health, and then as your work today as an executive development and coach in corporate healthcare and other organizations is really quite unique that you have both of those backgrounds. So if you could just sort of situate how you got into those fields and how maybe they complement each other.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like many college students, you're just kind of choosing a major that sounds interesting. So, when I was in college, of course, I majored in psychology and then did my graduate and PhD work specifically in couple and family therapy. And I first began getting into the attachment sciences actually when I was a PhD student. I did some work on a research team where we were working to reunify mothers, very young mothers, most of them, with their infants who had been removed from the home due to primarily neglect. And I was a therapist on that team, and I was working with these young mothers to teach them how to form secure attachments with their babies. And all of these babies were under 2 years of age. helping them to be attuned, to be able to read their child's responses so that they could build secure attachment relationships with them, setting them up for future success when they were eventually reunified. Then later on in my career as a couple and family therapist, I actually decided to specialize in couples therapy. And I became trained in some attachment-based couple relational approaches to therapy. So looking at kind of some of those same dynamics around attunement and responsiveness to one another in relationships and how that plays out in couple relationships. And then when I found myself in my very first leadership role, I started thinking about how some of these same dynamics, as I was observing relationships between leaders and their followers, and also thinking about myself as a leader, I realized that a lot of the same dynamics were present in those relationships as well. And so that's when I first became interested in really exploring how the attachment sciences might inform how we show up as leaders in the workplace.
That is beautiful. What a stunning narration of the steps along the way that got to where you are today. You have a lot of great data in your book, and a lot of the stories are very relatable. And one of the things I want to call to here is just the opportunity here, which is also disguised as a problem. And you talk about how your two examples in your book are Joanna and David. But you really talk a lot about how when a recent survey showed that 75% of workers said that the most stressful aspect of their job was their immediate boss, and 56 claimed their boss was mildly or highly toxic. So that's why this stuff is so important. And I can tell you, and I know you can relate to this, is I so badly want to reach and help more leaders, and so many of them are resistant or don't think they need help. But these numbers say otherwise.
Yeah, they absolutely do. And that, that research comes from McKinsey, of course, who, they're looking at huge populations of leaders and employees when they collect this data and do this research. So this isn't an anomaly. This really represents a large population. And, we've all, or probably many of us have seen the research that points to the impact that leaders have on, their employees' mental health, their overall general well-being. And so leaders are incredibly important in the lives of the people that report to them. And on top of that, of course, we do spend most of our time, most of our waking hours at work in the workplace.
Right.
And so it can either be, the workplace can either be a place where, we can flourish and feel fulfilled and have purpose, as you like to talk about, or in this situation, when, bosses are seen as stressful and toxic, they often really drain us and can take away from our flourishing and hurt us in some ways. And so to me, that is just so important to really look at how we can make our workplaces better. And I do believe it all starts with leadership.
I completely agree. And I completely also agree the huge impact we can make negatively and positively in people's lives. Yeah. So I love your 3-part formula that you put in your book. That's part of what I'm speaking of how tightly written your book is. And so step 1 of your 3-part formula involves deconstructing our leadership story. And I really like how you talk about how to understand the development of our left and right brains, et cetera. So if you could talk a little bit about this first step of deconstructing our leadership story.
Yeah. I really believe that in order to kind of move forward, we need to take time to look back. And this really is about self-awareness and honestly looking at our previous life experiences, honestly looking at our childhoods and what we experienced, not for the purpose of blaming, our parents or, trying to find scapegoats for, some of the challenges we might face in our adult lives, but just for the purpose of self-awareness and really understanding, because I think that awareness helps us to identify where we need to maybe make some changes. And so deconstructing our stories is all about looking back at our past and really trying to understand where some of our patterns of behavior, especially in leadership for this book, come from. Like, why do we show up the way that we do as leaders? How did we develop some of these patterns that we might engage in? Why is it so challenging for us to delegate? Or why do we feel like we always need to be the fun boss? So really understanding where those dynamics come from, I think, is the first step. And as we look back, there are likely things in our past and in our past, our stories as they've developed over time. There are some themes that we want to keep because they're valuable and they've served us well and continue to serve us well. But oftentimes when we look back, what we can see is that there are some elements of our stories, of our behaviors and patterns that aren't serving us well anymore. And so the decision may need to be made to rewrite that, to do something different and to change that part of our lives. Some might need just a little bit of revision. Some might need, complete rewriting.
Yeah, right. Let's just start over.
Yes.
Well, one of the reasons that I co-wrote my latest book, it's called The Power of Soulful Healing, with a clinical psychologist, Jamie, is because the premise is that every single one of us are walking wounded humans. Every one of us.
Yes.
It's tender, this thing called life. And so the more aware we become of how we're wounded and where we're hurt and what we're doing to try to heal that, the more effective we are in life, the better our relationships, etc. And we all have to do that work.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely.
So I had the first time that I've understood the attachment sciences, I was dating somebody in 2020 and I just couldn't understand him. And I also wanted to better understand my daughter as well. And so that's how I started learning about the attachment sciences and came to understand secure, anxious, and avoidant attachment styles. Can you introduce, each of those for our listeners and viewers?
Yeah, absolutely. And I do want to mention, if anyone listening, also has maybe some expertise in attachment sciences, there is a fourth style, which is disorganized or ambivalent, depending on if you're looking at children or adults, that I don't really address in the book, simply because it's linked to more severe trauma. And so in speaking about, not that there aren't leaders who don't have severe trauma in their lives, but especially when it comes to coaching and looking at leadership in the workplace, I think the space for that is in psychotherapy. And so I don't really deal with that piece. But the three major attachment styles that I do speak about in the book, the first being secure. And this is the attachment style we tend to develop when we have what I call good enough parents, right? No parents are perfect. But when our parents are caregivers, maybe they're not parents, but when our caregivers are generally consistent in the way that they respond to our needs, especially during those first 18 months of our lives, when we feel like we can count on them to be there when we're hungry or when we're tired or when we're afraid, then we develop security. We develop the belief that other people are trustworthy and they're going to be there for us when we need them. And we also begin to develop the belief that we're worthy, right? If someone is taking the time to care for me and love me and treat me with dignity, even as a very young person, then I begin to see myself as having just worth because I'm a human being. And so that generates a sense of competence and confidence in the way that we move about the world. So that's secure. And then in adulthood, obviously, those that have that secure attachment style, they're able to form more healthy relationships that have a good balance of both independence and dependence, right? There's that interdependence. Like, I know who I am, I know who you are, but we're there for each other and we're very deeply connected to one another. And they also are able to set good boundaries too, because they recognize that they don't have to take on everybody else's feelings or everyone else's problems, that they can see the boundary between themselves and others. And as leaders, then these people are the ones who are, open to feedback from anywhere, in the organization. They can admit their mistakes. They are able to coach and develop their teams because they want to lift other people up and they're not threatened by the success of other people on their teams. And they create those environments of psychological safety and flourishing. So those are secure leaders. The second style, anxious attachment, insecure, anxious. Oftentimes these individuals, when they're very young, they're in caregiving environments that are chaotic and inconsistent. And so many times this has been linked to like alcoholism or some kind of substance abuse in the home. This can be a common kind of outcome in that type of situation, where sometimes a parent responds or a caregiver responds to my needs. Sometimes they don't, and it's very confusing, and I can't identify what makes the difference. And so many times what that leads to in terms of behavior, these are often the children who will, throw the very severe temper tantrums because they're just trying to do whatever they can to get what they need from their caregivers. And they know that sometimes they respond. So they kind of up the ante in trying to get that attention and the care that they need from their caregivers. And so what these individuals learned through those interactions, they typically begin to think that there's something, they come to believe that there's something wrong with themselves. Mm-hmm. There's something wrong with me because I can't get this person to consistently care for me. So what am I doing wrong when they don't? And then they also have trouble trusting because there is so much inconsistency. So in adulthood, they're driving.
Let me stop you right there, Jim, just really quick, because I really want to drill into that as well.
Yeah.
Since it's time for a break, what I want to do is after we come back from the break, I'll ask you to situate the avoidance style, and then I want to dive more deeply into how those two show up in leadership. Because you do that so beautifully through David and Joanna, and that will help our listeners and viewers kind of hang on to it. But let's grab our first break.
Absolutely.
I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. We're on the air with Dr. Jamie Goff, the founder of The Empathic Leader, where she specializes in helping leaders unlock their full potential through executive coaching, insightful workshops, and thought-provoking keynotes. We've been talking a bit about how her initial work in attachment science and then executive coaching has come together. And we're also learning now about the different styles of attachment, how they show up in our early life. After the break, we're going to talk more in depth about how those attachment styles and that science shows up and manifests in leadership. We'll be right back.
Dr. Elise Cortez is a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, an inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Elise to speak to your organization, please visit her at elisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Elise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Elise, send an email to Elise, A-L-I-S-E, at elisecortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us and welcome back to Working on Purpose. I am your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. As I, too, am dedicated to helping create a world where organizations thrive because their people thrive, but they're led by inspirational leaders that help them find and contribute their greatness. And we do business that betters the world. I keep researching and writing my own books. So one of my latest came out called The Great Revitalization, How Activating Meaning and Purpose Can Radically Enliven Your Business. And I wrote it to help leaders and readers understand the dynamics of today's very diverse and discerning workforce. What do they want from you, and what would they like for you to supply in terms of culture and leadership? And then I give you 22 best practices to equip you to provide that for them. You can find my books on Amazon or any other booksellers, as well as elisecortez.com. If you are just joining us now, my guest is Dr. Jamie Goff. She's the author of The Secure Leader: Discover the Hidden Forces That Shape Your Leadership Story and How to Change Them. So before the break, you were just starting to introduce us to the insecure, anxious, dominant attachment style or approach. And you were sharing a bit about where that came from our childhoods and such, and beginning to start to talk about how it shows up in our adult behavior. If you could carry that on, and then I don't know if you want to talk about the other attachment style first, or if you want to go over and talk about Joanna and David as examples.
And so we can maybe kind of continue on the anxious attachment style. Okay. And in the book, I kind of speak about David, a coaching client, as an example of someone with an anxious attachment style who's in a leadership role. And one of the dynamics that I noticed in David's leadership is, as we were working together, is that David had a really difficult time giving feedback. And this was primarily because David wanted to be liked and validated, and he wanted to belong above everything else. That was his primary driving need. And so that made it difficult for him to give feedback to individual team members because he was afraid that if he did so, they wouldn't like him, they would leave the team, they wouldn't be as committed to the project. And so what ended up happening is that he punished the whole team, essentially, right? Because he didn't know how else to manage this underperforming team member in a one-on-one way. And so he would use kind of passive aggressive ways to deal with the problem of one person. And so we really had to dig into, like, where did his fear of giving feedback come from? And that's when we discovered it came from that need. He had to be liked and validated. He didn't really feel like he had much to offer. And so he was feeling really desperate to keep everybody on the team happy. And that ended up backfiring on him. And so we were able to work together to get him to a place where he kind of worked through some of those beliefs and challenged some of those driving needs for himself, and was able to get to a place where he could give feedback and see the benefits of that. But he was operating out of that insecure, anxious attachment style. And then the third style is the insecure avoidant attachment style. And this style develops when we have caregivers in our early childhood who basically are dismissive. They really don't pay much attention to us at all. So essentially, we develop the belief that I have to do it on my own. I can't count on anybody else. I'm the only person I can count on. I have to take care of my own needs. And so in leadership, in the book, I use the example of Joanna, who was a high-performing individual contributor, which is often the case among those who have avoidant styles. But when they move into leadership roles, they really struggle because they have a hard time delegating because they believe they're the only ones that can do it and can do it right. They have a hard time delegating and coaching other people, growing their teams. And oftentimes they prefer to work alone. So they don't really want to be bothered with other people. And they often can see other people as being a nuisance or as holding them back. And so there can be a lot of disengagement with their team. And so teams are left, wondering, how can I grow? I'm not allowed to do anything, or I'm really micromanaged in the way I'm trying to do things, and I'm never able to put my own mark on my work. And so those are some of the dynamics you end up seeing in leadership.
Well explained. And now, listeners and viewers, as you were listening to that, I really want you to consider which of those styles maybe might speak to you. I can tell you, when I read this, I realized I fall into the insecure avoidant group. I can totally recognize that. And that is just right there, just right there, recognizing this can really help.
Yeah.
There are probably times when I can be more secure, but that would be my default style. And so you go on to say that it's important to recognize that even those secure adults may have tendencies toward anxious or avoidant relationship behaviors when they're under stress or when they feel vulnerable and threatened. As you talk about one of your mentors in the book, where she really you were caught off guard by her response and was totally unexpected, and she came back later and apologized, which is something a secure leader can do when they recognize their behavior wasn't what they wanted and what was destroying relationships and results.
Yep, absolutely. And that's repair, right? So secure leaders make mistakes. It's not that they don't make mistakes, so they don't miss cues, but they're able to recognize those mistakes more quickly and then repair any ruptures that result.
Yeah, and this is just so powerful. And I think the examples you gave of the behaviors that we see with leaders will help both individuals listening to this who are leaders going, oh, that's me, I recognize me. And I also, what I got, which was so beautiful about your book, Jamie, is your empathy, saying, hey, if you're starting to recognize yourself in these pages, you might be uncomfortable. Great. That's step one. You're realizing this. And I think that's really powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, a lot of this came out like from my own experience too. Like you, I recognize that I have avoidant tendencies, especially when I'm overwhelmed and I'm under stress. And as I, looked honestly back on my own experiences growing up, I could see where those patterns developed, why I developed in that way. But then I could also see how some of that wasn't serving me well anymore.
Yeah.
And I've been sharing the story of actually an administrative assistant who sat me down and said, Jamie, you have got to let me do my job, because I was so controlling and I would not give her, I wouldn't empower her, to do the work that she was hired to do, because I wanted to be in control and I thought I was the only one who could do it. So I have learned plenty of my own lessons through all of this.
Well, and that's the beautiful thing. And right, so I don't think either one of us will be doing the work that we're doing if we didn't believe that we humans can grow throughout the course of our lives. And now neuroplasticity tells us that's true. We can. And so one of the things I love about the title of your book is that the subtitle is Discover the Hidden Forces That Shape Your Leadership Story and How to Change Them. You're not stuck with it. You
Right.
can grow past this. And we both have coached people over the years, and we can see how their style starts to it really negatively impact their home relationship, which comes with them to work. And when we help and we work with them, we can recognize how everything in life gets better because they've learned a better response style. And that's one of the things you talk about too in your book is how to develop a better response style. But first, being able to recognize this in yourself and having somebody that you can work with. And you do make a very strong point in your book about, if some of these things that you're dealing with might mean that you probably want to work with a therapist. That's not what this book is about. So distinguishing it. And I didn't know about that fourth style, by the way.
Yeah. And because, obviously I want to maintain the ethical boundaries around like coaching versus psychotherapy and the types of things we talk about. So when I'm talking with these themes, with my coaching clients, I'm not sitting down with them and doing a family history, like tell me all about your, about your family, like I would if I were a therapist maybe. But when those patterns of behavior are kind of coming to the surface and I'm hearing them talk about some of the things that they're struggling with, I often will just ask the question, well, where do you think that comes from? And that's where we start. And that opens the door. And then they might start to explore, I'm not really sure. I wonder where it does come from. And so then we can kind of talk about, as you look back on your life, what are some experiences that you've had that might inform how you're showing up in this way? But then if it gets into where they're noting or even mentioning to me, again, potentially significant trauma that they haven't really processed or dealt with, then that's the point at which, as a coach, I'm going to suggest that they seek out therapy. Yeah.
Now, just to finish this out a little bit more fully, you already introduced how a secure leader shows up with their behaviors, but let's just go ahead and expand on that a little bit, since we really you did a great job of really helping to bring to life the anxious and the avoidant. Speak a bit more about how the leader shows up as a secure leader. What kinds of behaviors are we seeing? What's maybe more natural for them there?
Yeah. Secure leaders, they're able to really, they recognize their own blind spots. I think that's, and maybe they don't see all their blind spots, but they know they have them. But they're not afraid of those blind spots. And they see that as just part of the human condition, right? We all have blind spots. And so because of that, that doesn't mean if they have blind spots or they make mistakes, it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with me or that I'm not a good person. They still see themselves as a good person. And they are then able to hear that feedback when it comes from their leader or from a peer or even maybe from a direct report. And they can hear that without defensiveness. They can listen with curiosity and be open to different perspectives as they're getting feedback about their own leadership and what they're doing in the workplace, as well as about just their ideas and the work that's being done. They're open to that feedback, and they create those teams where feedback is openly shared and everyone is sharing their perspective, and no one's afraid to make mistakes because it's psychologically safe. And they know if they make a mistake, it's okay, because the leader is going to be the first one to admit, I made a mistake. I failed here, and this is what I did, but this is what I'm learning from it. So they very quickly admit when they've made mistakes. And so they're truly collaborative in the way that they go about leading their teams. And they're not territorial, again, because they don't feel threatened by other people who are excellent, right? I think so many leaders feel threatened by team members who are really talented, that then they try to kind of grasp at what they see as their own territory to maintain their own sense of worth and purpose. And secure leaders don't hold on tightly to those things. They welcome the expertise and the excellence of other people and see that as, helping all of us get better instead of feeling threatened by it. And they're really able to, in terms of connecting with other people, they are very attuned in terms of being empathetic. So they are able to sit with discomfort, with ambiguity. They don't feel threatened by it or a need to fix everything. They're okay sitting with that and holding space even for their teams to be in those places as well.
Beautifully explained. And that really does help really open up what does that look like and who might and how might I grow into something more than I am today. And so I think that's a beautiful beckoning for all of us. Let's grab our last break. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. We've been on the air with Dr. Jamie Goff. She's the founder of The Empathic Leader, where she specializes in helping leaders unlock their full potential through executive coaching, insightful workshops, and thought-provoking keynotes. We've been talking a bit about and really going into detail into the attachment science and the styles that we all tend to adopt, and then talking about how that manifests into our leadership behaviors and effectiveness. After the break, we're going to talk about how we can start to rewrite our leadership stories. We'll be right back.
Dr. Elise Cortez is a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, an inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Elise to speak to your organization, please visit her at elisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Elise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Elise, send an email to Elise, A-L-I-S-E, at elisecortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us and welcome back to Working on Purpose. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. As you know by now, this program is dedicated to empowering and inspiring you along your journey to realize more of your potential. If you want to learn more about how we can work together and learn how the Gusto Now Academy for leaders and individuals on various journeys alike, you can make your way to gusto-now.com and then go to the training tab to find the Academy. If you are just now joining us, my guest is Dr. Jamie Goff. She's the author of The Secure Leader, Discover the Hidden Forces That Shape Your Leadership Story and How to Change Them. So for this next bit here, now I think we've helped our listeners and viewers get some idea of maybe where they might fall in these different styles and become a little bit more aware of their behaviors and such. Now let's talk about how they can start to rewrite their leadership story. So one of the things that you talk about in your book is the importance of learning how to navigate from being reactive to regulated. Can we maybe start there?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I'm talking about moving from reactive to regulated, it's really about emotional regulation, self-regulation. And that begins with emotional awareness. So becoming attuned to ourselves and our own emotional experience. I think a lot of people don't have a very sophisticated emotional vocabulary, so they can be like, oh, I'm mad, sad, glad, but really understanding the nuance of our emotional experience and being able to slow down, right? Our amygdala kind of brainstem responses to things that appear to be threatening in the environment, being able to slow down and really analyze what's happening so that when we move into action, we're doing something that is proactive instead of simply reacting to what we're experiencing. And so it's all about, regulation is all about regulating ourselves, and that can be through a number of different exercises, like learning how to regulate yourself physiologically. So through deep breathing or just pausing before you speak or before you act in certain situations, so that you can show up in the way that you want to. And that takes a lot of practice. If you are someone who is highly reactive, and you can react in one of two ways, you can become hyper aroused, so you can fly off the handle, right? And like everyone knows exactly how you're feeling, and you might be yelling or like slamming doors or whatever that might look like. Or you can become hypo-aroused, which is the other end, which is the silent treatment. I'm going to withdraw from you. I'm not going to speak from you. Both are demonstrations of reactivity. And so how do we manage that more effectively, not engage in those reactive behaviors, but instead make proactive choices about how we want to show up in relationship to other people?
Mm. I also appreciated how you say that emotional suppression really can hurt us,
Yes.
stuffing our feelings, etc.
Yeah.
And I certainly have discovered in my own experience of working with organizations and their people that so many people have gotten to a place in life where they've just learned that they can't share how they feel. And so they just stuff those feelings.
Mm-hmm.
And so, of course, part of what I'm out to do when I'm working with organizations is I'm trying to help open that emotional spectrum of experience, of understanding and expression in a healthy way. So people, to your point, have a greater vocabulary for their emotions, and they can experience joy, and they can also understand and be able to articulate why something really bothered them and hurt them. Right? It's just so important. And so I really wanted to call that out, because I certainly have found that emotional suppression piece lives strongly in a lot of organizations. It's not healthy.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And I think that when we're thinking about attachment styles, those of us, like you and I have talked about, we both kind of fall in this camp. Those of us who do maybe lean a little bit more toward that avoidant attachment style, we're particularly, we're more likely to engage in emotional suppression. So we have to be really careful about that. I have to be attentive to that, because that is my default.
I definitely can say in my own journey, I can go back when I was married, I can remember I wasn't nearly as well able to understand and to express and live in my emotions. And I've done a lot of work over the years to help develop that capacity. And it's such a different place to live in when you develop that capacity. So and that's another thing that I really want to echo on our conversation, Jamie, to our listeners and viewers, is this is about we're inviting you to grow, right? You're not stuck with wherever you are in life. You can grow, you can change.
Absolutely.
So encouraging.
Yeah.
The second, one of the other parts about rewriting that I wanted to talk about was moving from disconnection to connection, if we can go there next.
Yeah. I think in order to become more secure, you can't do that in isolation. You can't. It's not possible. You can only become more secure in your style through relationship with other people. Because to be secure, you have to feel like others see worth in you and that you're valued, right? And so being secure requires, it's a paradox. It's this tension between risk and safety, right? We want to feel safe in our relationships, but in order to really be safe, we have to be willing to take risks, to let people see who we are and to hear how we're feeling and what we're experiencing, to see us be vulnerable, right? And so that's the tension. And I think even as leaders in the workplace, we have the opportunity to kind of provide that environment for our teams where they can experience both safety and risk. And that's honestly, that excites me. And that feels like such a privilege as a leader to have the opportunity to provide that environment. But it takes work to get skilled in doing that. And so there are some things that I talk about that will help people to do that. Leaders do that more effectively.
I love that you called out the example from the movie Inside Out. I
Yeah.
watched that movie. I was doing some work in India for one of my clients, and I watched that movie on the way back. Somebody told me, some young person told me that I should see it. And I thought, well, I have time. I've got all these hours on the plane. I'm going to watch it. And I like how you situate it. This is for those of you who haven't seen it, listeners and viewers, it's really it's a cartoon movie, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And it features different characters that really are being an expression of different emotions. And so
Yes.
you have one character that's joy, another character that's sadness, and you have this central character named Bing Bong that has lost something important to him, and the sadness and joy go about trying to help him in very different ways. Can you
Yeah.
kind of explicate what happens and
Yeah.
how what comes out of that learning and the
Mhm.
insight out of that?
Yeah. So Bing Bong loses something that's important to him. And as a result, he's he's very sad and upset and grieving that loss. And so Joy, the character that represents the emotion of joy, comes over and she's trying to cheer him up immediately, right? Like, look at this funny face I'm making, Bing Bong, or let me be a tickle monster and try to make you laugh. And he's just getting deeper into his like grief and sadness as she's doing that. And she can't get him out of that, right? She's trying to solve the problem. She's trying to take the grief and the sadness away from him. The other character, Sadness, who represents the emotion sadness, comes over and sits down beside Bing Bong and just says something along the lines of, "Oh, you lost your wagon. You must be really sad." And then he goes on to share, like, yes, I'm so sad. This is what, I was hoping to do with that thing that I lost. And she, again, continues just to validate him and empathize with him. And the whole time, Joy, the other character, is over here saying, Sadness, what are you doing? You're going to make it worse, right? We have this goal. We have this place we have to be, and we need to get a move on. And Sadness just sits there, with Bing Bong, lets him experience his grief, doesn't try to solve the problem for him at all. And after a moment or two, he's like, okay. He cries and he's like, okay, I'm ready now. Let's go. We need to go this way to meet our goal. And, I've been showing that clip in the workshops that I've been doing on the book too. And I talk with leaders, like, what's your reaction to that? And I think so many times leaders are like, I don't have time for that. I don't have time for empathy. I don't have time to give people the space to feel their feelings or, to kind of let them sit in that for a moment. And my question to them is always, well, but what happens if you approach it like joy? Mm-hmm. That person's going to dig their heels in. They're going to want to stay in that negativity, that difficult emotional experience for a longer time because they don't feel heard. They don't feel seen. They don't feel validated. And it takes just a couple moments most of the time to provide that validation and that empathy and to help someone feel seen and understood. And then, they get unstuck, right? They're able to process what's happened and move on toward the goal or the metric or whatever the project is that they're working on in the workplace. So I think there's just so much power in, and you have to really be a secure leader to be able to sit in that and not feel like you have to fix it.
Yeah. So beautiful. I know. I remember watching it, and Joy says, Sadness, how did you do that? And she goes, I don't know. I just sat and I was with him. I listened to him.
Yeah.
And I really want to echo what you just said about, allowing your people to feel their emotions. I had Dr. Neha Sangwan on my podcast many years ago, and she describes emotions as energy in motion. They must be moved through our bodies, and they carry valuable data. So we understand what they're trying to tell us and how they're helping us experience. And so I really appreciate what you're saying. And I love what you're doing at the Empathic Leader, Jamie. It's so important. I'm going to be your champion and your cheerleader for this. I do similar work. So but not on the depth level that you're using and not through the tools that you're using. So it's beautiful.
Thank you.
So we're coming close here, and I want to get a couple of these. You talk about a few domains of integration. That I think I was really compelled. I took a lot of notes on all of this stuff. We won't have time to go through even just a few of them. But first, what do you mean by domains of integration? Why are they useful? And then we'll talk about a couple examples.
Yeah. I think integration, and when I say integration, I'm really talking about kind of integration of self and how you understand yourself kind of on a global perspective. And integration is really an outcome. So if you work to become more regulated emotionally, and if you're able to have deep connections with other people, then integration is often an outcome of that. And there are different areas of integration. And so really it's about how do we make sense of our story and our identity as a whole, taking all of our experiences into account, not, not like, painting things with rainbows and butterflies that weren't good, but also not allowing those things to hold us back, but to integrate them in terms of what we've learned and how we've come to make meaning of the things that have happened in our lives. And so that on a kind of a high level is what integration is really about. It's about meaning making and having an integrated sense of yourself.
Awesome. Okay, so there's several that you talk about here. I don't
Yeah.
know if there are any favorites that you want to share.
Yeah, I think, one of the areas is we talk about brain integration specifically.
Okay. Yeah.
And so kind of bilaterally in your brain. So right brain, left brain.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's not accurate to say, oh, I'm right brained or, oh, I'm left brained. Science is
We
really
have both sides. Yeah.
right. Science has really debunked that. Right. But people who have a secure attachment and who are more integrated, their right and left hemispheres of their brain work together better, right? So they're more attuned, to each other. So, the right brain, as it takes in sensory information and, really kind of is the emotional antenna, if you will, of what's going on. And then the left brain around meaning making and language and kind of linear thinking helps to make sense of what the right brain is experiencing. And so they're working very well together. And so you can see how that also relates to regulation, right?
Yeah,
Because if
yeah.
if you're have that bilateral integration, you're going to be more regulated emotionally as well. And you can also think about brain integration as being top down or bottom up. So like from your brainstem up to your prefrontal cortex, that again, instead of your like brainstem controlling what you do all the time or your amygdala, you can slow down that process and integrate it with what your prefrontal cortex is able to do in terms of sense making and more kind of rational thought.
Amazing. And there's so much in there too. Listeners and viewers, several others that she talks about as well. They're really intriguing. I do want to finish the show with our final little bit of hope about maintaining our new leadership story since we've rewritten it, we've discovered it, and we've rewritten it. And you talk about Dr. Barbara Fredrickson's work and the centrality of positive psychology and positive emotions.
Yeah.
Can you kind of bring us home here, say in about a minute, with how we can maintain our new leadership story?
Yeah. Essentially, positive emotion is incredibly powerful. And you can create opportunities to experience positive emotion. And so positive emotion is protective in terms of our health and our well-being. It's also beneficial in a team or in a business context, and there's some research around that. And so you can generate experiences where you have positive emotion. There are certain things that you can do, build into your everyday rituals and routines so that you're building that into your life. And the more positive emotion you experience, that helps you to live into a more secure attachment story. So I think just, talking about the power of positive emotion and really finding ways to cultivate that, not waiting. I think sometimes we think we have to sit back and wait to experience emotion. And that's not necessarily true. When it comes to positive emotion, we can cultivate it.
Go looking for it. So really, so that's gratitude and joy,
gratitude,
those
joy,
kinds of things. Yes.
Savoring the moment,
Yes.
Yeah. Yep.
I love how you talk about savoring. So here we are. We've come to the end of the show already. It goes by so fast. Dr. Jamie Goff, it is a delight to know you, to count you as a friend, as a colleague. Thank you for writing this beautiful book, for coming on Working in Purpose to talk about it. You are a gem.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Elise.
Listeners and viewers, you are going to want to learn more about Dr. Jamie Goff, the work she does at The Empathic Leader, helping leaders unlock their full potential, and her new book, The Secure Leader. You can start by visiting her website. It's drjamiegoff.com. Let me spell that for you. So it's drjamiegoff, JAIMEGOFF, drjamiegoff.com. You can also find her on LinkedIn too, by the way, pretty easily. Last week, if you missed the live show, you can always catch it via recorded podcast. We were on air with James Root talking about his new book, The Archetype Effect, Unlocking 6 Types of Motivation at Work. He helped us understand how differently people are motivated and the opportunity organizations have to examine their reward systems to encourage their full team to bring their best. Next week, we'll be on the air with Roderick Jefferson talking about his spectacular journey as a stroke survivor and building his strength further as a speaker and a coach. See you then, and together, let's lean in and learn how to create destination workplaces where people thrive while doing business in a way that betters the world. Let's work on purpose.
We hope you've enjoyed this week's program. Be sure to tune into Working on Purpose, featuring your host, Dr. Elise Cortez, each week on W4CY. Together, we'll create a world where business operates conscientiously, leadership inspires impassioned performance, and employees are fulfilled in work that provides the meaning and purpose they crave. See you there. Let's work on purpose.